right, we can start the show. What's up, everybody? It's the Arty and Adam Show live here, episode 210. On this fine February, the what are we? The 17th of February here, more than halfway through the month. These fucking headphones. Like I said before, don't buy cheap headphones. When you buy cheap headphones, you pay for what you get for. And I bought these fucking headphones are cheap. And we're all technically here. Look at the green screen's going in and out for you.
No, try to rework my lighting here.
I can't fucking hear out of my right ear. It keeps going in. It's like I'd rather it just be out and just be in my left ear, but for some reason it keeps phasing into my right ear. And it's fucking.
Is that from a 2-year-old screaming into it?
No, this is just from me buying $10 headphones on fucking Amazon. I gotta tell you, Amazon has some shitty products.
Oh God, there is no oversight into what they allow. It's pretty bad.
It's garbage. I would say about 50% of the shit I buy on Amazon, and I buy a lot of shit. Adam the Mallett, of course, to the left of me. I think I feel bring it. 50% of the shit I buy sucks. Yeah. And then the other 50% sometimes it works great. Like you just don't know. And you could read all the reviews you want, but you can't believe reviews these days because they're all bogged down with
bots. They're all bots,
right? Yeah. So it's like these headphones. I mean, granted, for $10 headphones, they lasted us since when was I in the apartment? 2017. So fucking 4 years.
Then you got enough. You got enough.
Yeah. So, but if you use them once a week, though, I've only used them 52 times a year.
That's true.
So I'm like, is it really worth that money? And it isn't even the headphones itself. The headphones work fine. It's the fucking connection going into the board. You know what I mean? Like where it happens to all headphones ever since the beginning of fucking headphones. I remember back in the day when you had those headphones when you were a kid, and you would always play with the end going into the 1/8. It wasn't the plug. It was the after the plug where the wires kind of get like frayed together. It was always loose for some reason.
Yeah,
sucks. That's what's going on with these things. But I mean, you think I have problems? Ukraine has some problems, so.
Ukraine has a lot of nice leeway into that, by the way. Yeah. That was good.
Do they have problems though, or do they? I heard they want to get taken over. I heard one side of the story.
They don't, because the biggest problem is here. Like all we have to do for this whole thing to end is not allow the Ukraine into NATO. That's the only reason why Russia's pissed. They don't want the Ukraine to.
Which I don't believe they're ever going to be able to get in there, anyways. I don't even know. I think that's like they wanna, but I don't think they could. I don't think there'd be enough people to allow them into.
Well, that's kind of a major sticking point for this whole thing.
Right. Oh, it's that, and it's just fucking Putin showing how big his dick is, basically.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, though, the only thing that worries me about this is like maybe nothing will happen, but at the same time, how many times, because we have this sort of weird conflict with Russia where they finally say, you know what, we're sick of fucking holding out, we're sick of doing this, we're just gonna fucking fight, fuck it. At some point, something's gonna give where they just fucking lose it. Maybe not with this, but maybe the next thing.
I'm on the side of saying that Russia really doesn't want to fight and they really don't give a shit. I just think they just like fucking with people, and they like fucking with us because they know because they couldn't fuck with us for 4 years. Now it's like we can push their buttons and we can make them like look crazy and stuff. And like what the hell? Because like honestly, there's no gain or loss for Putin, because gain is they take over Ukraine. Okay. What are you gonna do about it? Put some what do they call them? Fucking restrictions on them, right?
Yeah, I know, right? Okay. Tariffs or whatever.
Right, and he's gonna be like, okay, I'll just talk to my friends, the Chinese, and we'll figure that out. And if you don't do anything, he's just like a bully at school who just likes to poke people around, and like he just gets off on being a bully. And at the end of the day, a bully's usually weak at the core. You know what I mean? Like they're not gonna.
But I mean, in a way, though, aren't we kind of the bully? Like I mean, we live here, so we don't see it.
Not anymore, though.
It's like, who the fuck are we?
Yeah,
to tell Russia that they can't go into Ukraine. I mean, we're kind of.
It's not just us though. It's all of Europe because of I mean, it goes deeper than that. It goes back to like World War II. It goes back with like promises made with other nations and stuff. You know what I mean? It's not so much. It's yes, I agree. We were bullies in the past. I don't think we're bullies anymore. I think we're pushovers. I think countries look at us like we're a bunch of fucking pussies, to be honest with you.
I think we're annoying. Like we still stick our nose into people's business.
Right. Unnecessarily, most of the time, yeah. Yeah, but if you really want to be poking a nose in something, right? Something that really matters, you should be poking a nose up into Canada.
Yeah, right.
If there's any time where we should be like, hey guys, what's going on up there? Can we help out? Would be a bordering country in which we get a lot of resources from.
We'll get to that in 1 second. But back. I do want to get to that, but
Yeah.
back to the whole Russia thing for 1 second. The only issue with this is not necessarily with the Ukraine and Russia, but it's how China is watching this, because
Right.
how we handle this with Russia might dictate in a way how they deal with us with Taiwan.
Yeah, it would be the same thing.
You know,
Same idea.
could be. So there's a lot of it's playing out in the stock market too. Like anytime people criticize cryptocurrency because it's so volatile. Right now, are you kidding me? If there's a meeting behind closed doors about possible Ukraine, look at today, the fucking stock market took a tanking today.
Yeah, it's not doing good.
And any time somebody talks about that, like market goes boom. It goes way down. It's like it's extremely volatile right now. And that just goes to show people are nervous. People are
for sure. We're on our way to a recession. I mean, it's been, 14 years since we had a bad recession. I mean, it's that time of day. It comes every 10 years, right? It's a wave.
Well, I mean, I think March is going to be a bloodbath, because March, the Fed is expected to raise the rates. And anybody who's listening who doesn't know, like when you raise the rates, and it has to happen now, because what happens when you raise the rates, it makes it so our economy is showing signs of growth, a little bit of signs of growth, and we need to taper off of the pandemic because the Fed hasn't put tons of money in. So when you raise the rates, it makes it more expensive for companies and banks to borrow, and then that goes to the consumer. So when you raise the rate, stock market goes down. So nobody knows how many points that the Fed is gonna say, like, oh, we need to raise this, but we know it's coming. It could be 0.25, it could be 50.
Well,
and
also,
when that happens,
it affects the housing market too.
Yes, it does. But the thing is too, we don't know now with the Ukraine and Russia. It could be a perfect storm where maybe the Fed is saying, maybe we should hold off, because if war happens, the market's going to drop, and they care about, the money. So it's really hard to gauge, but I think March is probably not going to. Actually, March would be a good month if you have some cash, some sort of hodled up and held up and haven't invested in a little while, to actually dump into the market right after the stock market dives, to pop it in there. But yeah, I don't think March is going to be good.
It's also an election year too, and not a 4-year election, but 2-year midterm election, which also in election years, stocks don't typically do too well because people are very hesitant about the market and how it's going to sway.
Yeah.
And having the highest inflation in 40 something years doesn't help the situation either.
No.
Where
it's bad.
I mean,
7%.
7% is a lot of money when you break it down.
It's a lot of fucking
because money. For example, I'll tell you, I filled my oil tank in my house last year at this time for $425. I filled it.
At home, yeah.
A home oil, yeah. It was $425 for 3/4 of a tank last year at this time, and it was almost over $600 for 3/4 of a tank. And yeah, so we're talking about an extra 200, and this got to be filled every month, give or take. 6 months a year, 5 to 6 months. So you're figuring that's just home oil. That's just keeping your house warm. My electric bill has went up $100 what it was last year. I'm not consuming more electricity. In fact, I've become more energy efficient in this house by changing over light bulbs, putting things on timers, using less electricity in certain parts of the house. So, and technically, I've been using, if you look at my kilowatts, it's less than it was this year, but my bill is $100 more because the cost of electric's going up. Okay. Cost of gas, obviously, it was, I filled my tank the other day. It was $61. This time last year it was $41. So that's $20 a week times 52 weeks. So I mean, you can do the math. And here I am bitching, but everyone else is having the same exact problem too. It's not like
it adds up. It adds up. It's like, oh, you could say like, oh, it's only like $5 more, $10 more. But you know what? Over the course of a year, you do the math, and that shit fucking builds up.
And you can tell going to restaurants and stuff and working at a restaurant is less volume. And you said you went out Valentine's Day was less volume, and yours was a combination of you needed a fucking medical exemption to go to a restaurant in Boston, and then you need to
great. That was great.
Not to mention the prices of everything's going up too. So like if you go to a store and it costs you $40-something for a couple steaks, which used to cost like maybe $25, but just imagine what that's costing the restaurant. They're not the profit margin, just for people to know out there, the profit margin for food at a restaurant is almost slim to none. Restaurants make the most of their money on alcohol sales. So when food costs go up, the cost of food has to go up to even just to break even. And most of the time, like you're breaking even in a restaurant. So for every meal sold, if there's a fuck up on a meal, it takes about 10 meals to be sold to break even. So when you send an item of food back, it has to be redone or whatever like that, and that kind of goes in the waste. It will take 10 more sales in order to make up basically to break even for what that is. So you're not making any money on food. So restaurants have to raise the food prices, otherwise they're just in a hole. But I just read something today. The Heineken's going up. So a case of, I think a 12 pack of Heineken is roughly around, say, like $21, $22. They're going up to about $30 for a 12 pack or something like that. Ridiculous.
Yeah. Believe it or not, alcohol though hasn't gone up as much as a lot of most other things. Alcohol has only gone up. What's the chart? It was showing me that alcohol has only gone up like 4%.
Well,
like steak and like chicken has gone up the most, like 14.
So
like,
the reason alcohol too, a lot of it's getting switched over to plastic bottles rather than glass bottles, which is significantly cheaper. It's not environmentally safe. All these green people are really going to be, pissing in their own Cheerios, knowing that the fact that because there's a glass shortage, everyone has to go to plastic. Well, plastic tends to be cheaper than a glass bottle. So we've been getting most of our booze in on plastic bottles. Only the high-end stuff is still coming in glass, but even those companies are reducing their production to only their premier items. For example, Patron is really only focusing on Patron Silver, which is the number one seller. They're not really producing much of the extra stuff. And the reason for that is because they have to conserve their bottles. So they can't be, putting stuff out there that there's not much of a profit margin on because it sits on the shelf longer. It's not as fast mover. And all that cheap booze is all coming in plastic, which it's cheaper. So that's how they're breaking their even on those alcohol companies, because it's cheaper to get a plastic bottle than a glass bottle, obviously.
Horrible environment.
The environment. And it's not good plastic. It's not recyclable plastic. It's cheap garbage plastic. You know what I mean? And all it is going to a landfill. And most restaurants don't recycle. So it's just going away in the wayside. So, and I just don't understand the glass shortage thing. There's deserts out there. The only way to make glass is sand and fire. There's plenty of fire and there's plenty of sand. I just don't understand why glass isn't being made. Is it just, are the glass workers, are they all dead and retired? And is it like electricians and plumbers? You can't get anyone to make glass these days? Or
I don't get that either. I need to look more into that. It's something I don't understand, so I don't want to speak too much about it. But speaking of the environment, I was listening to an episode of Joe Rogan from earlier in the week. This guy named Andrew.
Might get canceled. God forbid you mentioned the JR name.
Andrew Dressler, who was saying that basically all the the global warming problems are 100% us. 100%. He was saying like 100% us. I kind of don't necessarily.
What do you mean 100% us? Like we're causing it, or is it just?
What's causing it? Because he was saying how you can say some people like, oh, continental drift, the way the planets align, the way we're tilted towards the sun. He's like, all those things happen very slowly. Right. He's like, what we're seeing since the change of the century isn't still enough time for all those things to happen. He's saying like those things take way more amount of time. He's like, but since the turn of the century, just the amount of things that have changed in terms of our global warming temperature is so bad that the only thing that could be causing it is us. And he pointed to a few things. It's interesting. I mean, I don't know much about the topic. Well, he has more credentials than I do.
It's believable.
I've never been much on the global warming component. Right. I've always believed that it's us partly, but.
And I do believe that, yes. I mean, because the Industrial Revolution started, we're about 250 years into the Industrial Revolution, into the burning of fossil fuels and the dirty factories and yada, 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 going into the 1800s. Okay, I'll give you that. I'll give you to the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, things weren't clean. I'll give you up until about, up until about 1970, give or take, the United States wasn't running a really clean industry. And then after 1970 stuff, the environmental stuff, which was a good thing that the environmental division started cleaning up factories and waterways and stuff like Flint, Michigan, which kind of still lingers, but it's not as bad as it was. And like Danvers, we Reuben, we are familiar with, or Peabody, Mass, with their the Kodak plant shooting chemicals. That was some shitty shit to do. These industrial companies were doing some shitty shit, just pumping, even in Everett over where the casino is, that when the chemical plant was there, just pumping garbage, polluted resources into resources and what people like, disposing like making our fish, making the waterways, our drinking water, all that stuff. So I'll give it, that was a good thing to kind of control that, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not big on over government oversight, but sometimes you have to interject things, and that's one thing that I think was probably a good thing to do. Now, with that in mind, the Earth is a living object, right? The ecosystem is living, and it's been proven to show that, like, when, say, for example, you abandon a house, right? How long does it take for nature to overrun the house and start growing and start, you know what I mean? Fast,
you're going
right?
into the It's called you're kind of fringing on what's known as the Gaia theory.
Okay. Is it just like the Earth healing itself, kind of?
That the Earth is like alive, like it's like almost like its own organism, and will find ways to purge things that are like bad or inflict things that are good, and like
and that's kind of what I feel like happens most. I mean, there's some things that which, for example, out in the desert when you're blowing up nuclear bombs for 40, 50 years, right? It's going to take a little bit longer for vegetation to come back, but it's been proven that, like, when abandoned cities, like look at like Chernobyl, right? That whole city that was there had been abandoned for years, but vegetation and stuff, even though it's whatever the catastrophic, it's not good, but it's somehow it's growing itself back, right? I mean, look at anything in the woods, right? And just, it just comes back little by little. It's not. They got
blue cats.
Yeah, fucking crazy. I would love to go on. You can do tours out there to Chernobyl, and if I ever had the resources, like, if it's a little pricey to go out there, I would love to go do a tour. Like, and I would pay good money to go out there to check that out, just because I'm very interested in the whole situation, and the whole
out there long
intent they just put over the fact they put this concrete dome over it. It's a lot of crazy shit going on there. But
there's a Netflix show called Dark Tourist, and he goes on, like, he tours a lot of like creepy shit. And there's one where he goes to Chernobyl, and like he was a little worried because they give you a Geiger counter, and then if you go to a certain amount, walk away from that area. Like, you're not supposed to be there for a long time.
No, it's a temporary view. But like, so like maybe that guy was like, yes, we are 100% responsible for the shit going on Earth, and there's probably a small percentage of nature coming, every so many hundreds of thousands of years or millions of years, the Earth changes, we go into an ice age, and yada yada yada, all that stuff. Yes, okay, he does have a point, but I do believe that we have, or most of the countries, I would say every country probably at this point, except for Russia and China, has made a honest attempt to pull back a little bit and kind of like make up for lost time.
Yeah, the Chinese don't give a fuck.
But it's going to take hundreds of years for this cycle. For all the shit that we did for the last 200 years, might take another 200 years for us to get back to an equilibrium at this, and for us, for our country, right?
No, you're right.
But, like, it doesn't help if other countries are fucking, like India, Russia, China, they don't give a fuck. Like,
give a fuck.
And that's the problem. It's like, if you can't get them on board, then what's the purpose? What's the point?
It's kind of sad.
It's I don't know. It's just like they don't give a shit about things. Like, and I understand you half the thing that sucks about politics is that half the people, I think I full-heartedly believe most people go into politics because they believe they can help and they want to help. Like, I think that's an issue. And I think the fact
talked about this.
Yes, you get paid to be a politician is the downfall of everything. Now, if you right, now I don't have to do anything. I could just get elected and get paid and do shit. Now, if you didn't pay the politicians like the forefathers originally wanted us to be done, you didn't get paid. It was a temporary job. You kept your full-time job and you were a part-time politician. And after a certain time, you leave and you move on to the next generation. I don't think you should be getting paid to be a politician. I'm sorry. I don't think you should be getting paid for this. I think this should be a volunteer effort. It should be like if you're working at a bake sale at your kid's school. You're not getting paid to do that, but you're volunteering your time to help a small establishment, right? And as a politician, you're volunteering your time to help a bigger establishment. And yes, you could take in some campaign money. You could pay for signs and garbage and shit like this, but I don't think you should take a paycheck. And I don't think people should be paying you to, because it's been proven over the fact of the last, probably 150 years, you have these career politicians, and all they're doing is sitting there and they're not doing anything. Like, you look at Massachusetts, you had Ted Kennedy for your senator for 45 years. What the fuck did he do? 45 years, right? I mean, you can go into term limits and a whole other stuff on that too. But like, it's a matter of fact, it's just like, you just get comfortable and it's no fault of their own. Hey, shit, if I was getting paid X amount of money to not have to do shit, I wouldn't be doing shit either.
Yeah.
which
It's true. But I think a lot of it too is that, like, we've talked about this too, where I think that some of these people go into politics, they go in, like you said, thinking like, oh, I'm going to change this, I'm going to fix
right,
this, and they get in and they realize they're in over their
can't do
head.
it.
They can't move the
Right.
needle at
Swamps
all.
deeper than
Like, it's
I thought it
just,
was, right?
yeah.
And I think that was
Uh,
Trump's biggest issue, right? He gets into politics as a businessman, thinking coming in as a business mentality, right? Like, all right, I've come into bad businesses, I fix businesses, this is how I fix a business. And he looked at the government like a business, which you should look at as a business because it does bring in money and it does spend money. So in a sense, a government's a business, right? I
mhm.
think he didn't realize how deep the basement was of this business and how much shit gets done that we don't know by you know what I mean? Like the average schmuck living in like Oklahoma, like, oh, I own a cattle farm, but they don't know that like 900 people are paid off on a daily basis. So like, this company gets the milk contract with the public schools and not this country. You know what I mean? It's something as
No,
stupid
yeah,
as
it's
that.
true.
And how do you fix that? You don't.
Yeah.
Revolution?
Takes time. Yeah, it either takes time or a change of thinking somehow, or a revolution. Yep.
But then history repeats itself and it'll just do it itself. It'll happen again, right? I mean, because you think about in 1700s when the forefathers were fighting because we didn't want to pay fucking tax on tea, right? That's tea we didn't want to pay tax on, which was probably just an excuse to break away. Everyone needs an excuse to do something, right? So their excuse
Mhm.
was we're not going to protest tea tax, even though we just want to pull away altogether. But we need a starting point, right? Um,
Yeah.
and then it falls into everything just being basically like the monarch. The only difference between us and what was going on when we were run by England is just the freedom of speech and the right to bear arms. The first two amendments is basically and a democracy, but I guess you could say in a sense they have a democracy because they vote in a prime minister. But what does the prime minister really do? You can go into, I don't know. You can look at Canada, what's going on up there, and
Oh yeah.
use
Okay. Yeah.
that. Right.
Let's get into this. Yeah.
So if I want to know what you think about Trudeau being a spawn of Castro. Did you hear this one?
I have not actually. I know shit is going sideways in Canada. I'm not gonna
Right.
lie. I am not up to par on what's going. I just know it's going bad.
So there is
All right.
a conspiracy, I would say. I'll leave it at that. That Justin Trudeau, whose father was a former prime minister of Canada back in the late 70s, early 80s, I believe, um, he was married to a woman, and his father and his mother were really big fans of Castro. In fact, he'd went up to Canada many times. They went down to Canada several times, and his mother was actually infatuated with Castro. And it is, and you can see some side by side pictures that Justin Trudeau's mother was having an affair with Castro, and in fact, that Justin Trudeau is the offspring of Castro, and in fact, that is why he is this pretty much a dictator up there in Canada because he's trying to live out his biological father's
Okay.
destiny.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of debunked.
No,
I mean,
there
I
is
just
one.
googled.
Yes, it's not factual at any sense. That the only thing
Yeah.
that leads to any possibility is the fact that there was a close relationship with Justin Trudeau's parents and Castro over the time. And there is a couple, you can see some side by side pictures of the two of how he looks more like Castro than his father.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's
I've seen. Yeah.
speculation. I mean, it's funny that that gets brought up because how similar his actions are currently compared to how Cuba was run for X amount of years. You know what I mean?
The difference is people are starting to get the Canadians, for being as nice as they are starting to revolt,
They should.
and they
Well,
are. The truckers are not happy.
here's the thing of Canada too, and this is I love Canada. I love Canada, and this may restrict me from ever going to Canada again. I really do love Montreal. I enjoy Niagara Falls. I enjoy my time. I've always enjoyed time spent in Canada. Friends over the years who are Canadians I've made with, great people. I've never met a Canadian I didn't like. Um, but that is such a country that's such pushed over, and they still suck the tit of the Queen of England, and they haven't. You can claim their independence, but they're not really independent. They still respect the monarchy. They don't have a democracy as they say they do. It is more of a dictatorship, like anything else. They don't have freedom of speech. They don't have a freedom like there's certain freedoms they don't have that we take for granted that is being shown right now. Like the fact that they still have the queen on their money is kind of like you're kind of just like you're just kind of like a fucking pushover. Like break away. Like why didn't you just say cut ties altogether? You know what I mean?
Well,
And if you look at the demographics of Canada, they're so split so many ways. It isn't funny. Like you have the Quebecians who still believe they're French and still believe they should be their own country. And for some reason, that province didn't adapt to anything else. And they just decided to keep their French roots from back in the, 1700s, right? Which is fine. And they try to break away many, many times, but they, not able to. But then you have a very conservative party, which is like Alberta, Saskatchewan, some of the central countries, provinces rather in the country. And then you have the super liberal ones, which are more like United States, the coastal provinces, and then Toronto, obviously, and because it's the biggest city. So when you look at an election, Trudeau only won 32% of the votes, and he won the election because they're so split and they can't figure out it really should be a country that should be split up 3 different ways. And on honesty, if you go by the beliefs of the way that people think, you should have Quebec as their own country. You should have the interior as their own country. And then, the rest should be their own country. And I think that would be a more successful way to run this country but that the majority of the population lives within 50 miles of the U.S. border.
Yeah.
Like, or you know what? Like, for example, like Saskatchewan and Alberta, why don't you just become part of the United States? Because you're more on the belief level of people from America. So why don't you just join us and let the Quebecians be their own little French little country up there in Never Land, and then have the dictatorship of Ontario? Like it's as easy as that.
Well, I do envy their protesters because unlike the ones in America that just like halt, like get annoying and just throw things. Okay, right. According to Fortune magazine, Canada's Freedom Convoy, the fucking truckers, they've shut down Ottawa and they're blocking 500 million daily in cross-border trade. Right. Like that's why I would say hit them in the fucking wallet. It's like a nut punch.
Right.
What?
They're doing it peacefully. They're not doing it. They're not. Listen, I respect truckers. I think they do.
It's fucking awesome.
Truckers are one of the hardest working people in this country. I mean, if you bought anything, it came on a truck, right? So you should, when you see a truck driver or a trucker, you should say thank you, because if it wasn't for them, you wouldn't be getting shit, right? And you know me, I'm always big on the truckers. I listen to the fucking radio station on XM on a regular.
I know you do. You have a CB radio.
I have a CB radio. That shit. Yep. And I you know what I mean. But these people are peacefully protesting by just parking their trucks in the city, and they're having hockey games, they're having cookouts, they're having block parties. They're peacefully protesting, and basically all Trudeau has to do is say, "Hey, listen, mandate's gone," and like 85% of the truckers are vaccinated, but they're all sticking together for the 15% of the people who aren't.
Yeah,
like that's some brotherly love right there. You know what I mean?
Million a day.
It's crazy.
500 million a day. Could you imagine that? 500 million a day gone from a freaking truck. Like, why can't we do that when we start to like want to like?
And they tried doing this in Canada, where Antifa tried to get up there and QAnon tried to get up there, and then the news was reporting there's a Confederate flag up, and the Confederate flag means absolutely nothing to Canada.
Oh, it's
And it has nothing to do with Canada, Canada's revolution,
not even Canada in general.
Right. It is a southern. Not even a southern, it's a southeastern flag from 250 years ago.
Yeah, I hate that shit. They gotta stop that. I hate that shit.
When you see a Confederate flag flying in Ottawa, you might as well have a flag of Mickey Mouse on it, because it means you know what I mean? Like all it is people trying to interject into something that's not really what it is. And then obviously media capitalizing on it for a story. And I mean, that's all it is.
It is.
And in majority, people can see through that, right? If you're a Canadian and you see a Confederate flag, like I said, you might as well see a flag of Mickey Mouse. It means the same to you because it has no history or relevance to you.
Yeah, I'd roll my eyes. I'd be
right. Yeah,
it's Americans. It makes us look bad too.
Right. It actually, it's just kind of like some asshole went up there. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like when you're a Red Sox Indians game and I can't say Indians anymore. I'm sorry, a Red Sox Orioles game, and someone yelling sucks. Like it has no relevance for either team, right? You know what I mean? It's just like an asshole yelling Yankee sucks.
The Guardians. Sorry, yes, the
Guardians. Yes, I'm sorry, the Guardians. And I was gonna say the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, and you can't even say that anymore because they changed the name of that. But yeah, there's really no relevance, unfortunately. But good for them. I hope they stay there. I know they're ticketing them now, but like, and they're going to threaten to arrest the truck drivers. But there's a lot of truck drivers. You're not going to arrest every single one of them.
Yeah, that's
and it's actually kind of cool because what they're doing is, really showing how shady some of these companies are and some people are. Like, for example, like the GoFundMe people, froze their assets because they were violent. Although, if you want to go back in history to about 2 years ago when there was protesting going on in this country that was extremely violent, they were still getting money fed from them. So it's kind of a double-edged, it's kind of hypocritical. And now they're being investigated on for bad commerce practices, right? And then you have like these other companies who are donating money now, like we got hacked and stuff like that. So like people's true colors are coming because, and all it is these truckers just hanging out, sitting by their truck and not doing anything. Like, and it completely stopped. If you did that in this country, the country would stop. The problem is there's too many stupid groups that would go in there, that would cause trouble, and then make it look like the majority of the people are terrible people. That's the problem. No one can stick together. Everyone wants to have their own little agenda. You know what I mean? It's at the end of the day, majority of this country, regardless of your political association, is believes the same thing, right? I would go out and say that 75% of the people in this country all are moderate. They're not one way or the other. They have beliefs of certain ways, and maybe some are stronger than others, but for the most part, they're in the middle and they could go either way, right? And that's why we have.
Yeah, it depends where you live in the country too, for sure.
It depends where you live in, but I say it like in general. Like, and I think there's a lot of people who like, and even those numbers are skewed because when you look at election maps, you look at districts, and the Democrat might have won 51% to 49%, but it's completely blue. It's not a true map, right? There's still 49% of the people that voted Republican, but it does not represent it correctly. And if you ask someone on the street, and you can even tell by polls, you can look by your president, you can ask people, what do you think? And there's always going to be a small percentage either way on both ends that are crazy. And I think if you go to the right too far or to the left, you have a mental illness. I really think you do. I think you are so blocked out from reality that you can't take in any consideration of anything different in life, right? If you're so far on this side and so far this way, you're so locked out and blocked out on the world that you have no conception of regular society. You know what I mean? It's like you drank so much of the Kool-Aid that you're so convinced that this is either the right way or the left way, and there's no middle ground. But I feel like most people have a middle ground, and you could talk to people and be like, yeah, maybe I'm a little stronger on this thing than this thing. But, and that's the only reason Biden got elected when you think about it, is because he presented himself as a middle ground candidate who would be like, yeah, we're not going to have mandates. We're not going to have this. But then he lies. And all of a sudden you can see the ratings, that's.
Oh God, it's at an all-time low. Yeah. Right. It's horrible. Yeah.
So once you start lying, people are going to be like, well, you just lied to us, so we don't like you anymore. We just lied to you. Now, if he didn't lie and if he stuck to his guns, he'd probably be a middle of the road, not an impressive president, but not a terrible president. He would just be a blue president, right? And everything would be fine. And everyone wouldn't give a shit. Like, no one would be watching Fox or CNN because no one really gives a fuck. Things are going all right. The economy's all right. Everything's all right. You know what I mean? It's just when you start moving that line one way or another, people start getting pissed. Because you're never going to make 100% people happy. You're never going to win.
It's true. You know what really scares me, though? I feel like our country is at such a vulnerable spot right now, to the point where, like, it's okay. Biden's not going to win again. But the thing is, we keep having these severe swings back and forth. It's very severe, left and right. When you have things like that, it opens a gateway for somebody to kind of come in and then all of a sudden switch things in a way that seemed good at first. And then, remember Hitler? Everyone fucking loved Hitler until he started killing
during the Olympics in 1934. They thought he was.
Oh, it was great. And then all of a sudden, like a flip of a switch, like that is what we're leaving the window open for here. And like we don't have any sort of stability. So someone could come in, look like the fucking shit, and then just destroy it all.
Hitler took advantage of the situation. He came in at a time where Germany was so depressed from
World War I. Yeah.
Right. And he was the kind of like we're going to bring things back. We're going to bring Germany back. We're going to make this a great place. He had the Olympics. Everything was great. His problem was he needed a scapegoat for why things were bad. So he blamed the Jews, which could happen again.
Well,
China's still doing that. I mean, if you really want to go on a limb and do what they're doing with their certain what they call them, the was the not the wiggers, the waggers, what the hell is that? I forgive me for not knowing, but it's
yeah, I know. I'm not educated in this.
Yeah, it's a certain race of Chinese people who they're trying to eliminate, basically. That because they're Muslims, they're not. Was it Buddhism? Is that the official? It's Buddhist, Chinese Buddhists. Is that what they are?
Well, I know the Dalai Lama is a terrorist. He's considered a terrorist by the Chinese.
Really? Okay, maybe it's not Buddhist. Maybe they're. I don't know.
Chinese religion. Yeah, you know what? I'm googling it right now. I admit I am in the same ballpark as you here. Okay. Well, I know the Dalai. It says Buddhism, Taoism, Islam, Catholicism, and Protestantism.
Really? So Muslims
they recognize 5. Yeah, those 5.
I think the Waggers or something like that. Those are the people they want to eliminate because they're the Muslims, but they're peaceful Muslims. Like they're just like, and they're in the north or they're the western part of the country, which is close to a lot of Muslim countries. So it's obviously why that's the situation.
Yeah,
but they want to get rid of them. It's like a genocide they're doing over there with them. Enslaving.
I sort of understand. This is going to sound horrible at first, but let me explain. Like anybody who might be listening is going to be like, Adam,
I don't think OJ would have done it, but I can understand why he would.
No, but like I get why throughout history people have kind of picked on the Jews, and it's because in a way it's almost like they don't let people into their own club, and it's a matter of kind of jealousy, maybe, and a matter of like, for example, I remember. Like a decade ago, I was dating somebody and she dumped me because I wasn't Jewish. And that's actually kind of offensive. Like, it's like, you thought I was Jewish? And she's like, well, I thought you looked Jewish. Okay, I kind of do. It's true. I do look Jewish. I accept that. But I'm not. But the fact of the matter is I was dumped because I was Jewish. And it's like, when you don't let people in your own club.
Right.
And you have this, what's it called? Tribalism.
Yeah.
When you don't let people in, it breeds hate, almost a little way out of jealousy. Like, what the hell? Like, why can't I do that? So you end up hating that group for that reason. And I think that's kind of throughout history, kind of maybe might have happened.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, when you think about it, like from the beginning of Jesus, right? I mean, he was a Jew who decided to pull away from the Jewish religion, right? I guess, right? If you go back to the history of Jesus, we believe in that. And he pulled away and started his own religion, I guess, and the Jewish people didn't like that. And they kind of, I mean, listen, I mean, most wars in the early times were all fought on the religion, right?
It's always about religion.
And it's funny that it's fought on a non-factual idea, right? Because there's really no proof for the most part that there's an afterlife or there's a true God, right? For the most part, we're just organisms living on this world. And then we live our lives and then we die. And that's it. There's no proof there's an afterlife. There's no proof that one of our religions is correct or not. In theory, when you think about that, if you think that only one religion is correct, that means that majority of the people die and that's it. They don't live on, right?
Well, this is where we get into aliens, but we're not going to go
right.
And we can break this down into further stuff, but
people are religious to a point, right? There's a faith, there's a hope. And I think that's what keeps people kind of morally in line, right? Because knowing that, like, in this an afterlife, maybe I do get to see the grandparent that I loved, when I die, or maybe there is a reason why I'm, I mean, it keeps people. Maybe if I'm a good citizen, I don't kill anyone, my moral compass stays. And I think religious was a strong thing established to keep people morally in line, right? Which is good for society altogether, right? But then people start fighting over it. And when that happens, I mean, there's been wars. I mean, look at the Middle East. They've been fighting over religion for, thousands of years for no reason.
That's not been proven. Exactly.
But right. It's not like someone came back and was like, hey, yes, I just came back from death. I know, right? Those Jews, they're right. We should just, because if that was the case, everyone would just be like, oh, shit, we should get on that bandwagon, right? Because if that guy's saying it's true, he's been there and he came back, right? Wouldn't you be like, well, that's the winning ship to be on. Why am I going to be on a losing ship, right? Why am I going to put all my hope in something that doesn't exist? And so it's kind of immature when you're fighting over I know the strong religious people. It's kind of goofy if you're fighting over something that's not 100% proven, right? It's like fighting over like who's a better superhero, Batman or Superman? They don't
Yeah.
exist.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
I've always said that what if, and remember when I broke your brain when you're like, oh my God, maybe you're right. Remember what I was saying, how did humans survive this long without any help? Remember I was telling you about that? And you're like, oh my God, you're right. Like, how
right,
could you live past a certain age when there's so many other things out in the wild that could kill you if someone
right,
wasn't
right,
helping you? Right? Well, like my thing is what if religion started off as a game of telephone, almost like a game of telephone? It
right,
started off somewhere else. And then remember, it spreads, and then tales get told, and then
right.
centuries, decades, millennia pass, right? And these stories get carried on. So I've always said, like, look for like similarities, not necessarily like what this one stands for, what that one stands for, but take all the religions, right? And try to find what
The comic,
all of them
right? Yeah,
might have in common. And maybe that's something that did stick. Maybe that's
right.
something that it did originally start as, is that's one thing, since all those religions do have at least that,
And they all
you
believe
know?
in a god of some sort, right? Some kind of higher power. They all believe in,
Yes.
right?
So it's like they can all agree. We can all agree there's a higher power because
Right.
all those have that, So maybe like a game of telephone, how it breaks down. People
Mhm.
keep spreading
Right.
it. So
And
they
you
all just
travel.
resulted in a breakdown, but it started
It
somewhere,
makes sense
you know?
because when you think about it, like, what did they pretty much have tracked down that the start of evolution on humans came from the Middle East, right? And then we all expanded from there one way or another. And
Yeah.
the species adapted according to the climates and stuff and the situations. Um, why people in Africa are darker because they had exposed to the sun more, so they had to put extra layers of skin so they can adapt to the skin. While people in Asia have, slanted your eyes because of the sandstorms and stuff and able to adapt to that.
I don't
And
know, but I heard about that. I don't know if that's
I
true
don't know if
though.
it's true or not, but it's just
Yeah.
it's a theory, right? And people who
Yeah.
in the more of the northern countries have fairer skin because they're not exposed to the sunlight, so their skin doesn't have to. So over time, the species has evolved and adapted to the situation, and it makes sense because if you figure if you came from a core and you expanded out, and the stories had traveled over generations, over hundreds of thousands of years, then and there was no documentation. Things weren't like written down until like, well, like the turn of the
Yeah.
God, I know the Rome
I don't even know. Yeah.
and the Egyptians of some sort were hieroglyphics and stuff. I mean, but when you like documentate, I mean, you can go on the ride in Epcot and they'll tell you the story of history, right? I guess going in the big ball, they'll say, these people were the first ones to write down, the Egyptians were the first ones to write documents down and stuff. It's like,
So full writing systems appear to have been invented independently at least 4 times in human history. First in Mesopotamia,
okay,
present-day Iraq,
yep.
which cuneiform was used between 3400 and 3300 BC.
Okay. So I mean, that's fair enough. We're talking about
Oh,
5,000 years, right?
so that's long, man.
It's a long time, but like 5,000 years in the idea of the whole Earth is like a small little dot, right? I mean, when you think
Well,
of it,
yeah. I mean, I remember I was telling you at work the other day, like our concept of time, like it's a to understand how much time takes up is like unfathomable. Like I was saying, Cleopatra existed closer to the invention of the iPhone than the building of the
right,
pyramids.
right, right.
Right?
So,
That's insane to think about because you would think that's around the same time.
and
You
then it is
know?
incredible, like, yeah, exactly. It's like, wow, okay, Jesus. Like,
Yeah. Right. What the fuck? That's a long time.
I mean, in theory, Jesus has been dead for, 2022 years, I guess, right? I mean, when you think about that, like after AD BC, right? So
That,
that's like
it's long
nothing.
to us. It's long to
Long
us,
to
but
us,
nothing in the grand
nothing,
scheme of
right?
things. Yeah.
So yes, I agree with you that everything was established and you find common ground. I bet if you really broke everything down and all these religions, you'd find out that it all came from the same story that was evolved over time,
Yeah.
which is then really makes it silly that people are fighting over it because if it's like a story that was made up, you're fighting over like some fantasy, right? And then
True.
you start in wars over it, right? Because you're so passionate about it. But those people are like remember, like we said, there's like a small percentage of the right and a small percentage of the left, they'll never change. And there's a religious group, there's a small percentage of those people who are so cuckoo in the head that they'll never change.
It's true.
So, like, what do you do with these people? Do you put them in a mental institution? Do you, like, how do you deal with this? Like, a way to, like, you can't talk sense into these people. I mean, you've probably encountered people who are so bent on a subject that there's no common sense talking to them. Like, you can't be like,
yeah, it's called our workplace.
toxic environment that we can
I just
get
don't even talk anymore. I
Yeah.
don't talk when those topics come up.
Listen, in the last 2 years, I've heard the two extremes of COVID. I've heard we're gonna lock down and throw ourselves into a dungeon, and then I heard fuck COVID. It's over with. Over in the matter of 2 years. So like, no one could even focus on the same subject, right?
Yeah.
But that's the thing too. If you really want to break it down, the whole COVID, look at the country as a whole, right? You have states that didn't, and thank God we have states. I gotta say, there's a few things that I look in this country and I look at, and I'm like, I'm grateful that we have this type of establishment, because if it wasn't for this, it would be in trouble, right? So the state, the federalism, right, where each state kind of governs themselves, and they're independent in a way, but they still have to go under an umbrella of the federal government. They make their own laws for the sense, and there's very few federal laws, right? Most of them are state laws. So you could have a state like New Hampshire, which borders Massachusetts, and have very different laws, but it gives people the option to be able to govern themselves in a way where if you're a Massachusetts citizen, or a resident, you could go to New Hampshire and you could enjoy the benefits of New Hampshire without actually have to being a New Hampshire resident, and vice versa for some other things. So there's very little people that go to Massachusetts to enjoy anything, because there's really not much you can enjoy here that other states don't provide. But like, there's an option. So with that in mind, when it came to COVID and states were kind of governing themselves, and that's the way it should have been. It should have just been a state by state thing. And if you didn't like it, you could leave. And that's the option we have. But we don't like it here. If it gets, I've gotten to a point in the state sometimes where it's just like, maybe it's just time to leave. Maybe it's just time for me to go 10 miles north to New Hampshire and live there, right? It's the same, but it's different, right?
Yeah.
So, but a lot of countries don't have that, including Canada. Even though you have different provinces, they all look under a federal law, essentially. Like, you don't have provinces. I with the drinking age, like Ontario, Quebec is 18, but the rest of Canada is 19. I guess that's the only difference that I'm not know about. If I'm wrong, please leave a comment and tell me the difference between Alberta and Ontario, other than, I don't know. But that's kind of a good thing we have. And like, there's always a few things that's to happen, like, the Supreme Court in states turning over some of these COVID restrictions because they're just unconstitutional, and then the Supreme Court realizing and understanding that they're unconstitutional, like some of these mandates, and getting rid of them. That keeps a little bit of positivity in my life when I think of stuff like that. I go, there's hope, right?
Yeah, there's still somebody there pulling.
Right.
Yeah.
The system's still working. You know what I mean? Because you get really discouraged sometimes when like there's all these mandates going and martial law is pretty much put in place, and you're sitting there and it's like, that's a little discouraging, because I thought there was a system of checks and balances set up for this to make everything to be able to be a legit way of living and your freedoms and stuff. And when those are taken away from you, you feel really pissed, and it's like, what can I do about it? But because these levels of the government and the different branches of government exist, yes, a person could put something in place, but it's a temporary thing because it won't last, right? Because it doesn't hold law. And you start seeing that with like these mandates going away, and like in the city of Boston, where like the new mayor comes in and puts all these mandates in, but there was already an agreement put prior that these mandates couldn't exist, and it was more of a tyrant and a dictatorship of putting these things into place where she had no right to, and they were thrown out. And you look at stuff like that, and it's like, well, okay, the system worked. There was a system put in. There was a reason for that. Someone tried to, fuck around with it, and then it got thrown away. And even the president, I put a presidential, I'll write something in, and I'll make a presidential order that this is going to happen. But then it takes time. You have to be patient, right? You have to be patient. And in time, it happened, and it finally worked itself out. And it was, we get thrown out. If it's not constitution, it gets thrown out. And stuff like that keeps you kind of motivated and positive to like kind of understand the system, right? A little bit like, hoo-ha. I guess we won this one, right? The freedom, but it can get discouraging. There's been a lot of discouraging moments in the last couple of years,
It is deflating. I'm at the point now where I'm just kind of like done talking about it all in that sense. Like, it's just like I can't complain anymore.
Right.
It's just like what, like it's just so tiring.
We're
all kind of tired.
It is, and I think most people are, right?
Oh yeah.
But that's what they want you to do. They want you to get so worn down, you just say fuck it, right? They want you to get so worn down that you just wear a mask for the rest of your life. Like that's the tyrants want you to be like that. They just want you to just be that way. And luckily, there's enough people fighting back to say, no, that's not. We're not going to live. Like the thing that pissed me off the most over the last 2 years was the term "new normal."
Yes, that was, I hated that shit.
Enraged me.
I did not like that. Yeah.
When you say a new normal, that implies that the new normal for the time from here on will be this, right? So the new normal, everyone has to wear masks. No. That's some terrible.
That's pretty bad.
The proper way of saying that is, so this is a temporary action put into place for the time being. Should have been the proper way of saying it, because you would have pissed off a lot less people. You would have been like, all right, it's temporarily. For how long it lasts, I don't know. But when you say a new normal, you're implying this is the way life will be forever. Without any facts, without any data, without any specimen of time to evaluate to see what's going on. You were just going out there saying, oh, this is a virus, new normal for everyone.
Yep, new normal. Yeah. No, it's not normal because we're dealing with a fucking virus. Yeah, it's like, it's nothing normal, anything about this. Yeah.
Nothing. It's not normal. And then I really, really, really don't get the whole pushing of the mask thing for the kids and like the teachers pushing for. I don't understand this.
I don't either, man. At this point, I don't either.
Is it that like there's like one or two teachers so petrified that they're gonna get something that, but when you present the science to them, you're like, well, you only have a 5% chance of like, it's only a 5% chance better of you not getting it with a mask. So like when you don't wear a mask, you have a 95% chance instead of like 100% chance, right? Like, is that number not mean anything to anyone?
Yeah, there was a better case for all of this early on, but now that there's more data,
right,
and it's like we're starting to have more information, intel, it's starting to look even more like bullshit.
Right, and I think most people, when this first happened, were on board with precaution, take caution, right? And how long does that last? 3 months, 6 months? Okay, is that enough time to accumulate enough data to start evaluating? I think so. Were they properly giving us the data? I don't think they were. I think they were holding back on a lot of stuff. I mean, I think there was a way to present it like, all right, we're 6 months into it, this is what the data shows. We're a year into it, this is what the data shows. But they weren't. And I think it's because they were able to grab enough of people in the beginning that they were trying to hold on as long as they can. And then
no, man, I agree with you 100%.
As human beings, regardless of what country you're from and what your culture is, most of us have a fighting soul, right? Because that's why our species has survived this long, because you have to fight to survive, right? This is why you can leave an infant alone. This is why when I look at an infant, I look at my son who's 2 years old, and I look to myself, how did he survive for so long? And obviously, but this parent, I mean, the parenting and stuff like this, but like, I always think of my theory, if I left this kid alone for a period of time, would he be able to adapt? Would he be able to survive? For the most part, he probably would be able to. I think most humans would be able to. He would figure it out. He'd figure out how to get food. You know what I mean? Like when they're smaller and they're babies and they're tiny.
Well, at his age, no, he'd probably kill himself accidentally because he doesn't know how to make the food.
Or would he kill himself accidentally? Right. Yeah. But like there would be a determination, right? There would be a fighting spirit inside to survive, right? Most things want to survive.
Yeah.
So like there would be a determination to be able to gather food, to do whatever you need to do. Yes, there's a very high chance that you would die. And I think with the technology and the way society is these days, with so much dangerous stuff around your house, it increases those odds, right? But if you, you know what I mean? But if you
electrical outlet, let's point my finger in here.
Stoves, heavy objects, right? Stairs, right? I mean,
height.
But like if you put this child into nature, I don't know, 500,000 years ago, right? Where there's very little that could get you other than like a tiger, right? Like you increase your chances of survival, right?
Yeah, they do.
I mean, just look at birds, right? The mother bird brings the egg into the nest and she hatches the egg, and then when the chick is born, she gathers food and she spits the food into the mouth and chews it firm. And then in a matter of a couple months, the bird flourishes and then leaves the nest. And once they leave the nest, they never come back. They don't need any help anymore. They figured out how to live, independently, and how to hunt, how to gather food, and in turn, how to reproduce. And when you look at a bird, what does a bird live? 5 years, maybe? I don't know, give or take.
Depends what kind of bird.
Yeah. Compared to a human on average of 6.
No, God, no. Actually, some parrots live longer than humans. Some parrots can live like 85.
So there you go. And they learn a lot quicker.
Horrible.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're more independent on their own for a longer period of time. So like when I look at a human, I look at a baby, I go, yes, I think this baby would be able to pretty much survive on their own at a certain point earlier than we give them the freedom to survive on their own, right? Like 18 years old, you're free to do what you want. But like in reality, they probably could have figured it out sooner. So I think like humans, they always want to fight to survive and survive. And then I think that's what's unique about us, right? That's why we haven't been captive by any other species before. That's why the tigers haven't put us in zoos. we have a survival instinct that it goes all the way down to the roots of, our evolution, which is great. And I think most people don't like being told what they want to do. I think most people will respect the government and respect rules that they can see are beneficial to them. Like, don't kill anyone, because if you do, that's a terrible thing to do. You go to jail. It's a penalty for that, right? Don't steal, which more goes in the religious moral thing, but that's in a whole nother, dynamic. But like, I just think majority of us are good. And I think there's so much, I think media just puts us head to head together for no reason whatsoever. Because if you talk to someone who has a different political outlook at you and you just have a conversation with them, you realize you have more in common than you don't. And then you're fighting someone unnecessarily. And I think that's what people just got to listen, right? And like I said, you're going to have your odds. You're going to have your odd people, right? Just listen.
Yeah. I got to exhale. It's been quite the conversation.
Crazy, right? But it's like, it's like,
I know. We went on for an hour about it all. I love it though.
It's just like, I think people just listen to you and I, and people would be like, you want to listen to these two assholes? Probably not the two best people to listen to, but I think we make a little bit of sense.
I think so too. I don't think we're completely crazy.
And I really do think most
just
people, just a little fucked. But I mean, like we were looking at the Victoria's Secret model today. I mean, that's
the Victoria's. That's a whole other story.
But is there anything wrong with that? I don't know.
I don't think so.
It's not enough to throw us in jail, but I mean,
not at all. No.
We're just that's our animal instinct kicking in, right? Because we're just like, oh well, boobies, right? Yeah. I mean, how many times have you been distracted by boobies in your entire life, right?
I've lost count.
Every other fucking day, right? It's like, there you go. That's our instinct to survive, because we see those, we're like, oh, we need to reproduce, right? And if we don't reproduce, we don't continue to speak. So there's nothing abnormal about that. So I'll leave it at that. All right. That was an interesting, in-depth conversation today.
It was, my friend.
We actually have a guest next week. His name is Elon, I believe. Elon, I gotta look how to pronounce his name. But I met him actually 7 years ago at a wedding. Oh, wow. And it was the worst wedding I ever been to in my life.
Really? And that's hard to say. Really?
I was a guest at this wedding with the crazy flight attendant girl. Wow. And he was a guest at this wedding because he was dating a girl at this time who was friends with the girl who was getting married. So me and him were both outsiders at this wedding, and we had met briefly while we were there. And I come across him on Instagram. I go, this guy looks familiar. And I looked into it. I messaged him, and sure enough, so he's coming on next week. He's actually doing a show in Boston the week after. So he wanted to promote it a little bit. And I said, yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
So he's a funny guy. He'll be on next week, and we'll probably get into the wedding story a little bit, because that was a fuck show of a wedding. That's the wedding that didn't have a DJ. They just played swing music all night. No one really was like enjoying themselves. It was at
sounds familiar. What you're telling me sounds very familiar.
Yeah, it was at the Ringling Brothers Museum in Sarasota, Florida. Yeah, it was a
look forward to it.
Mess of a story. So I want to hear his perspective on this wedding and see what he thought of it, because I don't think he's no longer with the girl that he was there with. So he could really kind of open up and give us a true insight of this shit show. I mean, I went down for the free trip to Florida, but I mean, who wouldn't? You know what I mean? I like your invisible glass when he hits the lake.
No, I'm just sipping water from my Cinco de Mayo.
Where'd you get that from?
Glass.
All right, were you plugging anything? You got anything going on?
I mean, like I say, go check out the World Potato. I mean, I'm working on shit, but I don't know what's gonna come out. Working on other things, so. But.
It's like that. It's like Eric's podcast. He changed the name.
Oh no! Don't say that, dude. That's like almost like a decade in the making. Mine's just like 3 months.
So for some reason, I was in control. I was like a sub viewer of his podcast, of his the Facebook page for this podcast, and I got an alert today saying your name has successfully been changed. So it was called On the Rocks, Now it's called Tito's and vodka. I don't know.
I mean, I'm working on passive income, building passive income. That's like taking a lot of my time.
Well, yeah. Listen,
I'm actually doing constructive things by not doing YouTube things. So that's why.
Yeah, I mean,
my energies.
Oh, for sure. I mean, yeah.
Live.
Oh, we didn't mention the Bengals, my T-shirt that I'm probably not going to wear again, but
yeah, we'll talk about that next week.
Yeah, and that is it. You can get me on the Wicked Explorers. Of course, if you're watching this already, the ID84 show on YouTube and all that stuff. So I guess we'll see you guys next week. Toodaloo, motherfuckers. Bye.
See you tomorrow.